If you're spending thousands of dollars on deck lumber to build a deck yourself, you're in the right place. These 10 tips will save you time and frustration. And they're based on me building my first DIY deck, where I experienced a lot of both of those. So I hope they help you. Number one is learn. Now it seems obvious, but it's one that's easy to skip over, and there's some ways you can learn, and I'll just share how I learned. I watched a lot of YouTube videos like this one. But there are different kinds of YouTube videos on deck building. There are these 15 to 30 minute start to finish videos. They don't really teach you how to build a deck, but what they do teach you is process and systems and what steps you should take. And there's usually a couple little good pro tips in there. So I started with those. I watched 10 or 15 of those general YouTube videos to get a feel for just kind of how things went. And I looked for the commonalities. What are the things that everybody mentioned? Everybody said, do this, do this. Well, those are best practices. So I wanted to be sure I did those. So that gave me the scope and told me, yeah, I can do this. Not going to be easy, but I decided at that point I could do this. Then the second type of video are the detail videos, where there's a video on how to do the ledger board, or how to pour your footings, or how to do a header board, things like that. As I was working on footings, I watched a lot of videos just on footings. When I got to ledger board, I watched videos on ledger board. And I focused on the step I was on, or starting, and was paying attention to the next step, because as you'll see through this process, every step builds on the next, and no pun intended, but it does. And frankly, my favorite, there are a lot of good ones, but my favorite was Dr. Dex. He's really good. He's got a lot of good tips on general ones as well as sometimes specific ones. Number two, related to that, is know. Know your local codes and why those local codes are there. Like LA, earthquakes. If you're in northern Wisconsin, where I used to live, 2 feet of snow on a 200 square foot deck can weigh 6,000 pounds. So they've got to account for snow load and, of course, for a really deep frost line. And then Florida, it's really just a giant sandbar, let's be frank. That's all it is. So they've got to account for that, and of course for hurricanes. And frankly, a strong enough hurricane is going to destroy any deck, but you've got to account for that too. When it comes to knowing the local codes, it also pays to get a permit. That could save you a lot of headache when you sell the house and a buyer says, well, how do I know this deck is safe? And you're like, well, I did a good job on it. And okay. Then they may want you to hire an engineer, and all kinds of bad things can happen. So if the city wants you to have a permit, get a permit and follow the steps. And frankly, it's kind of a last line of defense when they come out and look at your project and say, oh yeah, maybe you should do this because you forgot this critical step. So anyway, I always suggest get a permit. I've also found the local pro desks can be a huge help if they actually have pros working behind those desks and not just clerks. Where I live, the Lowe's has a really good pro guy, and Menards has some really great people that are super helpful behind those desks. And the other ones in town, not so much. So your mileage may vary, but I found those can be a great resource for help when you kind of get stuck on something. Number three is plan. Once you kind of know what you want to do, you've got to have a plan. And the better plan, the better the job's going to go. So I suggest you mark it out physically in your yard where you want it to go first, and then look for problems. Is there a gas meter in the way? Is there a sidewalk that's going to be inconvenient, or the sidewalk's not in the right place to where you want to put the stairs? You need to find out anything underground. Is there power lines, cable lines, sewer lines? You really have to know that before you stick anything in the ground. So know what you're working with. And then physically draw out your plan. And this is the very crude plan that I drew out that, believe it or not, the city gave me a permit for, that gave me kind of an idea. But it wasn't enough really to build a deck on, especially since I'm not a tradesperson and I've never done this before. So I found a draftsman, professional draftsman, to draft up the plans for me. And these are the plans, some pieces of it. And he did the plan to my city code. So the joist heights were correct, and where I had the footing heights were correct, and all the different things were listed on there. 80% of what I needed to know for code was there. Now I'm still glad I printed off a copy of this city codes, which was 14 pages just for DAX, and used that as a reference point as well, and frankly to fact check. But I had that professional plan made, and frankly, that was the best single decision that I made. So have a good plan. Oh, yeah, and it did change up just a little bit along the way. Next is to decide what you're doing step by step. What are you going to do first, second, third, and so on. This is how I did it. I put the footings in, poured concrete, because that takes a while to set, and they're 3 feet deep where I live. So I did them first, and then I did the ledger board, which fits to the house, and everything builds on that. And if there's one thing you want perfect, it's that. Then I did the posts and the header board, then the joists, then the framing, then the railing posts, just the posts at that point. And then I did the decking, and then I did the railings, and last I did the stairs. Boom, 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 boom. And again, when I was watching videos, I was paying attention to what I was doing and getting about ready to do. And that worked really well for me. Hopefully it works for you. Number 4, materials. Get the best materials you can. Once you've got that detailed plan, make a materials list, a very thorough one. And this is where your Pro Desk can really come in handy. Bring your list, bring your plan when you're going to order those, and they may have some suggestions on what maybe a better thing, maybe the right kind of screw for your area, or the spacing between your posts and your concrete base. The deck should last 20 to 40 years, and I'll share a couple things about how to push it to the further end here in a little bit. But think about this. People you're never going to meet, never going to know, are going to walk on this deck and use this deck. So you're building for decades. I think that's kind of cool. Now, once you know what lumber you need, I suggest you go to the yard and pick out your own lumber. It's going to take some time. When I was picking up the actual deck boards, it took me 2 hours. I went through so many boards to find the ones that I liked that I thought were really good quality. If you just order it all and have it delivered, you're going to get whatever's on top, which is going to be the stuff that people like me rejected. Now, they'll still deliver it. You can go to the yard and pick it all out. They'll bring it out to you still. But if you've got the time, I suggest you go get your own. And if you can't, for some reason, pull them aside and then just change the ones that are unacceptable. This is a mistake I made. I got the whole lot brought to me at the same time, and it was a long time before I got to like the decking boards. And of course, by then, all the grass underneath there was dead, and it was kind of in the way. So I would suggest breaking it up into 2 pieces. One, the first part, your ledger board, header board, posts, frames, if you need concrete on the first one. And then the second order, your decking, railing, stairs, things like that. So that'll keep some money in the bank till you need it, but also keep your yard a little bit cleaner. So back to deck life, there are 2 things you can do that really make a huge difference. One is end sealer. So when you cut a treated board, that end isn't treated all the way to the core. So this deck sealer seals that up. When it gets wet, it doesn't wick in there and start to rot the boards right away. That adds a tremendous amount to the life of your deck. So seal up every single end, posts, rails, whatever. Seal them up. Second is deck joist tape. And just like it sounds, it goes on the top of your deck joists, and that's where water is going to stand when it rains. And by sealing those up, it's going to stay dry, and again, extend the life of your deck. So maybe it's going to be on that longer end, and even more people you're never going to meet are going to walk on it. Number 6 is quality. I struggle with perfectionism sometimes, but perfection is the enemy of your whole project. You're never going to get everything perfect. So go for excellence. Then you're going to win. But don't sweat that 1/16 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch or maybe even 1/4 of an inch sometimes. You're not building furniture here that has to be to a 1/16 or a 32nd of an inch. Just do a good job. One thing that really hung me up for a while was that boards of the same dimensions aren't the actual same size. And where that made the biggest difference to me was on the joists. Even if they're all 2x6s, they're going to vary just a little bit. So what I did, and I learned this from watching a video, was when I was ready to do them, I stood them up all on end, lined them up, and then sorted them tallest to shortest. And it wasn't huge between the tallest and shortest, but it was noticeable. And then I installed them that way. And that did 2 things. It let those deck boards lay flat on a board almost every time, and also created a slight bit of angle for watershed. So worked for me, and I did end up planing off just a couple things were too high. But don't sweat it in most places, but on the joists, that's what I would do. You look at this board, over 9.5 inches, and this board, I can get it focus in there, 9 in, maybe 3/16. Number 7 is joints. Everything fails if the joints aren't right. Like on hangers, the hangers are going to have 4 to 6 holes depending on the size of your hanger. Get a screw in every single one of those. Hurricane ties, the same thing. Get a screw in every single one of those. And when you're connecting boards to boards, directly screwing them, put in enough screws in a nice straight line right in the center. Like in this picture, this is a fascia board screwed into the joist, and you'll see I used 4 screws for every single one of them. Drew a line, they're right dead center. That thing's not coming apart. Just a bit of a PSA here is the number one place that decks fail is where it connects to the house. That ledger board comes away from the house, or sometimes the joists aren't connected very well because somebody didn't put all the screws in. That is the most common point to fail, and that's why I mentioned earlier that's the one place to be perfect if you have to be perfect. Number 8 is your mantra: plumb square. Plumb square. Every step of the way, make sure everything you do is plumb and square. Because if you're off plumb or off square on one step, you're off square and plumb for the whole rest of the job. And plumb is really critical because if you're angled, it's going to go over time. So plumb and square, check, check, and recheck. Oh, a little tip on square. I might be the last person in America that heard about these, but it's the speed square. And it's just great. You just stick it up there, you draw a line, and you've got a square. I hope whoever invented this owns an island in the Caribbean because it's really great. So again, I'm the last person probably. And this one I have, you can tell how much I use it, like all the time. So get one of these, get 2 of these. Number 9, keep going. This project's going to be an inconvenience to your household. You might have a back door that's blocked off. You're going to have stuff in the backyard. It's going to be a problem. And hopefully you've got buy-in from your family, so they're going to be okay-ish about that. But keep going. Use the elephant method. As you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And like I mentioned earlier, focus on the step you're on and be really aware of the step that's coming up and start preparing for that. But just worry about those things. Don't worry about, are my deck boards going to be too curvy, until you're worrying about deck boards. So do your step, worry about the next step, do your step, and then you'll be fine. Keep in mind, this job might take you a while. If you're working alone on evenings and weekends, it isn't going to go up in a day or two. Be okay with that, but just keep going. This deck that I built, I cut every board, I drilled every screw. I had help for pouring concrete and putting up the header board because it was 2 2x12s by 20 feet screwed together. I don't even know how much that weighed. It was more than I could handle. So I got a little bit of help, but for the most part, did it on my own, and it did take some time. And I had to be patient with myself, and my wife had to be patient with myself as well. So if you have to rest or take a break, it's fine. Take a rest and take a break, but don't quit. You will be so proud of what you accomplish when you finish this job. It'll be amazing. Like I said, I've never built anything of this scope before, and every time I walk out on there, I go, dang, I did this. So you can have that same feeling. Number 10, have a party. Celebrate. When that thing's done, signed off, complete, get the grill out, invite a bunch of people over, and it's okay to humble brag a little bit. You've earned it. So as a little bonus, there are a couple tools that I suggest you get. For the most part, just your everyday tools are fine, but these 2 are important. This is for straightening your decking boards, because they're going to have a little bit of curve. No matter how much time you spend getting boards, some of them aren't going to be as straight as you want them. So that little tool helps you winch those in place when you screw them down, so everything's nice and straight and beautiful. And that goes to my second tool, which is very optional, but I loved it. It's the Camo Deck Edge Fastening System. This lets you hide the screws in the edges, and it makes such a clean look. And no, it's not sponsored. In fact, I bought this one on eBay. To me, it's just such a clean look. It does take more time, a little more effort, and the screws are a little pricey. They're really proud of them. But if you want to look, it's a really good look. So those are the only other tools I suggest. There you go. Let me know how you do. And thanks for watching. And if you really like this, you might buy me a cup of coffee. Thanks.